John Herdman has resigned from Canada Soccer and joined Toronto FC in a move that just has massive connotations for the entire framework of Canadian soccer. This is a huge move that means very different things to two teams that I both follow very closely on this channel, the Canadian men's national team and Toronto FC. And I understand that not everyone on my channel is a fan of both of those teams. Some people may only be here for Canada Soccer, and some people may only be here for Toronto FC. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to split this video up into two parts. We're going to talk about the Canada Soccer part of it first, and then the Toronto FC part of it second. And to keep everything easily understandable, I'm going to keep the logo of the team I'm talking about in the top corner up here. So, Canada national soccer team. John Herdman has resigned. And this move all stems from one key important fact. Canada Soccer is broke. Canada Soccer is just completely money poor right now. They're having contract disputes with both national teams. It's just a complete disaster. And in the middle of this is John Herdman. Now, Herdman is a guy who his stock has risen consistently since becoming the coach of the Canadian men's national team in 2018. He rose with the team consistently until about 10 months ago when he went to the World Cup, made a bit of a fool of himself, and then got out-coached by every team we played there. But his stock is still significantly higher than it was when he joined Canada Soccer back in 2018. And so for him, staying on a sinking ship is not an ideal situation. Thus, getting away from Canada Soccer is probably a good call. The problem for Canada Soccer is how are we going to replace him? Yes, people have been critical of John Herdman recently, since the World Cup. At the World Cup, some flaws in his managerial ability were exposed. And yes, I agree, John Herdman is not the perfect manager. Theoretically, you could get a better manager than John Herdman for the Canadian national team. The Canadian national team does not have the money to get a better manager than John Herdman. They don't even have the money to get a John Herdman quality manager right now. Who the heck are we going to replace John Herdman with, because we have no money to hire anyone else to coach? Like, in terms of international coaching talent or high-level coaching talent from elsewhere in the world, there is just nothing. Mauro Biello is the interim coach. He's probably not going to be the main one, but like, who are we going to hire? Because who could come in? I could see like an internal guy or a local guy coming up. Like Bobby Smirniotis is a guy who I could see going to coach Canada Soccer, because even with Canada Soccer being as poor as they are, it still probably is more money than coaching a CPL team. But that's the problem that Canada Soccer is in right now, is that there's so little money that who the heck can you even afford? Not very many. So the door of people to be able to go and get now just isn't very high. And like for John Herdman, he saw what's a sinking ship. He probably wants to distance himself for like this whole money issue that's going on in Canada Soccer that's probably a couple of years away from being fully fixed. And so it makes sense for him to leave and continue his career elsewhere, because like sticking around with Canada Soccer right now is just going to tank his reputation and tank his status a bit more. And so I don't blame the guy for leaving. I'm just concerned as to who the hell we're going to find to replace them, because we're not going to have the money to pay any high quality options. So it's probably just going to be a relatively unknown figure in the international coaching scene. Or Bobby Smirniotis. On to the Toronto FC portion of this. Toronto FC somehow has almost been a bigger disaster than the CSA this past year. So Bob Bradley was brought in as the coach at the beginning of 2022, and he was a complete disaster. And since he left, Terry Dunfield's been the interim, and Terry Dunfield has not won a match. So everyone knew TFC needed a proper full coach, and everyone knew it wasn't going to be Terry Dunfield. And John Herdman was the easiest answer. Let's be fully honest with this right now. John Herdman is not Toronto FC being revolutionary and going out and getting a big coach. John Herdman is the Canadian national team coach who probably wanted to leave the Canadian national team, and is an easy option for you to get and an easy fan win, because he's a recognizable name who has brought Canada Soccer up. So Bill Manning goes out and yet again does the most uncreative thing ever and signs John Herdman. Now, John Herdman, decent manager of the Canadian national team, quite good actually. Zero experience coaching club teams. Now that means that he's a complete unknown. For a team that needs a coach to come in and be like the savior of the franchise right now, because the coaching situation ever since Vanny left has been dire, John Herdman is not like the savior of the franchise pedigree coach. He is the easiest option. Do I even think that he can coach at the club level? Like, yes, he was praised earlier on in the Canadian national team days for getting the Canadian national team to play like a club team. Like if any national team coach, fully national team coach, can transition to club team coaching, it's John Herdman. He's very big on just teams having set formations and like all that. So I think I think club coaching may actually be better suited to John Herdman than national team coaching was. For Toronto FC currently, is he the coach that Insigne and Bernadeschi are finally going to respect? Probably not, because again, he's just the Canadian national team coach. That's his coaching pedigree. And so for guys like Insigne and Bernadeschi, yeah, the Canadian national team made the last World Cup, but I don't think just Canadian national team coach is enough of a resume to get most high-level designated players in MLS to completely buy into you. I do have hopes for John Herdman though. Like I do have really high hopes for what he can do at this team. I think he's going to be great, especially in the youth development standpoint for especially like the younger Canadian Academy players coming up. I think he's going to be very good in that aspect. I think he's going to be really great dealing with like the regular MLS players. I'm a bit concerned with like how designated players are going to deal with him though. Like it's my biggest concern with John Herdman is his coaching style and just everything about how he's dealt with the national team doesn't strike out to me as the type of guy who is going to be able to deal with highly egotistical, high-paid designated players in MLS. But I think overall for coaching a cohesive team, he's a good choice. And I think that he is a good choice for a coach in Major League Soccer. For the current Toronto FC team and the way it's built, I'm not convinced he's the exact coach for this team. But that's why he's not coming until October 1st. Like he's not coming until October 1st. He only gets 3 games this season. So this season's Toronto FC team, he doesn't have to deal with. It's next season's Toronto FC team that he's here for. If him and Jason Hernandez can build a team around what John Herdman wants, then I can see John Herdman being a very good coach in Major League Soccer. The current Toronto FC team, I don't see him coaching well. But once we start getting in players that he likes, once we start getting in players that like he wants to deal with, and we get rid of players that like are only here because Bob Bradley or whatever brought them in and not here because John Herdman wants them, once that starts happening, once like the transition of players around to what John Herdman wants starts to happen, if that's allowed to happen, then I can see him being a very solid coach in Major League Soccer. I think he has very good potential to like get the most out of your TAM players, the most out of your like homegrown players. He seems like the type of guy who can get the most out of your non-designated players, and that's something that Toronto FC has needed in recent years. I'm not convinced with designated players just yet, but I do think he does have a solid shot at being a pretty damn good MLS coach. So there you have it. John Herdman, no longer the head coach of the Canadian national team, now the head coach of Toronto FC. Let me know down below in the comments who you think is going to be the next head coach of the Canadian national team, how you think John Herdman's going to do as the Toronto FC head coach, and how you feel about this move. As always, if you like this video, hit like. If you want to see more of my stuff, hit subscribe. Follow me on Twitter. Link is down below in the description, and I will see you next time.